Well, it's time to be looking at the month ahead, and with everything that's been happening in the last few weeks, definitely a worthwhile look. With all the chaos that has been happening in the last few weeks, I thought I'd quickly remind you of a few things I said earlier in the year. So I started the year in January with this in my annual forecast. To what we've seen about some mining and nuclear issues before happening in the last quarter of the year. As ever, things are not what they seem. The planets of illusion and delusion are so strong throughout this year that there's this whole sense of the dichotomy between what you're not seeing, what's happening behind the scenes, what's presented in front, what's brought out by the press. Late in the year is another serious crisis time for the government. It is an extremely challenging November and December, and it's most likely that the changes that I've alluded to in the presidency or with the president are actually around the November-December period. But remember, the last months of this year, very challenging to the government, in December particularly, just like it was in 2015. The president himself is also shown as doing something which tarnishes the image of the country, not something. In summary, outside of the details, everything points to a big shake-up this year, including or related to the state of the president or the presidency itself. And although I think the odds are against there being a recall in the Mbeki sense of the word, I wouldn't be at all surprised if Zuma didn't end the year as the president, or there was. These are the circumstances that astrologers could use to predict a sudden coup within the presidency, not of the country, of the presidency. Getting the clues over there. In May, the battle between the president and the minister of finance became very apparent, and the astrological circumstances around that are very strong. Here's what I said in May about what we can expect from that. To talk about Jacob Zuma, from my point of view, the astrology of being born on the 12th of April is really where a lot of stuff is busy happening in the zodiac right now. And that's why so much has been going on in Jacob Zuma's life. We've spoken in the past about the big changes in the late part of last year, May of this year, and October later this year that are evident in his life, and where we expect to see the playing out of the events related to him. And as I've told you before, while there's a lot of big shake-up in May, it's not likely until October or after October that we actually see any changes to the presidency. We're still not even done with that topic, and that will unfold during the year. The finance minister, Pravin Gordhan, is also born on the 12th of April, just 7 years after Jacob Zuma. And as I said to you a moment ago, there's a lot busy happening in that tiny little corner of the zodiac that belongs to the 12th of April. So that also means a lot of change happening in his life in exactly the same timing and with the very same idea as big, unstable, unpredictable changes. Zuma and Gordhan being born on the same date, experiencing exactly the same kind of disruptions at the same time, essentially astrologically are enemies. They are both Mars warriors at each other, as the circumstances can see. And from what's developed during this May upheaval for those 12th of April people, we can see that there's a lot more unpredictability to happen because of the enmity between them. Scary and exciting times for us, but we're not done yet. So what I can say about it is as follows. With respect to the current interplay between Gordhan and the government and Zuma, it's likely that this is beginning to fade for now, or to recede a little bit into the background for now. But we will be seeing more of that in the late part of the year, October, and in the early part of next year as well, where it continues to play out. It's possible that the finance minister will also lose his job, resign, be moved, whatever it is, in that October period. The same. Whatever happens with Zuma, there are going to be parallel happenings with Gordhan at the same time. So it's likely to be the playing out of what's going on between them, and maybe Zuma's loss of the presidency after the elections, and perhaps only around October or as late as February next year. As I've said from the beginning, there isn't a strong guarantee for him like there was with the previous president, but there are strong signs of a lot of big changes to follow, again in October and February of next year, for the finance minister and for Zuma, and the country remains at the whims of those changes as all that time goes by. So, as you can see, it is still a rough ride ahead of us. There is still a lot of action in the battle between the two, Gordan and Zuma, born on the same date, the 12th of April, which is where all the action in the zodiac is happening right now. And from that, you can see that we can expect this to go on for the next few months. December and January are extremely critical, especially for the Minister of Finance. And I still think we will see a good few changes in that regard. But the battle comes to its head, and perhaps its final head, in February of next year, February 2017, looking intense and unstable, both in terms of the battle inside the government and also in the fees must fall and student protests that are associated with it. February might still be another visit to what has been happening in October. As it stands, kind of odds-wise on the astrology at the moment, the next 3 months extremely unstable for the Minister of Finance, although judging by his current behavior, it really means he's got a few more aces up his sleeves and might still do a few more unpredictable things. And then in the early months of next year, some significant changes in the government, perhaps around February. If Mr. Zuma is to experience any significant changes in his role, that we might see in the early months of November, but it still looks to me like February is when we'll finally know what are the consequences of everything that has been happening this year. So stay tuned. I'm bound to have a bit more to say about it in the months that unfold. But what about you? Your month ahead is really what's more important. Just to say, a lot of people have asked me, why does the month ahead show come around this time? The astrological month, which begins when the sun enters your sign, is always somewhere between the 21st and the 24th of the month. It changes month to month and year to year, but it's always that neighborhood. So the cardinal signs this month have a lot of ups and downs to look forward to. Not only the Aries, but all four of you, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, have a little bit of an exciting roller coaster ride ahead. Changes are coming and changes are happening. You're experiencing a lot of frustration in your life, and the changes will help shake up that frustration and actually make some changes happening that could even be seen as quite liberating changes. So work with the change this month. It's not as dramatic as the Aries in power that we've been hearing about, but certainly in your own life, time to really allow to shake up, change some things. Something's got to change, and this could be the month where that happens. In the case of Aries, well, you are the most unpredictable of all the signs at the moment. You might have noticed that, and most of the change is happening around your sign. There are lots of new things that are beginning, and although you don't have enough information on everything, this is a great time to go ahead, even if some of it is a little bit in the dark. Go for it. Don't be shy. You know, you are someone who rushes in where angels fear to tread, and that behavior is probably going to serve you quite well at this time. So a little bit of courage, especially when it comes to starting new things or making new changes, that's going to lead to a lot of success for you at this time. Changes which are exciting and bring new things are not the only things, though. There are still some frustrations coming from your work environment. In fact, some of you are feeling a bit like slaves right now and might be feeling a little bit rebellious. This is the time to make changes, but rebellious might be a little bit too strong, so take it a little bit easy. You're feeling forced and blocked and frustrated, and you need to look for some outlets for that. Although, of course, some of you might need to make the really big changes. Change the job. But in all, this is the time to keep your cool, make proactive changes, not out of rebellion, but out of the time for, but out of the fact that it's time for something new. Go ahead with that. For Cancerians, this is a time to expand your horizons. Like all the cardinal signs at the moment, there's a certain amount of frustration going on, and you need to look to greater, greener pastures in order to find the right kind of input for you. In fact, input from far off, new information, foreign things, all of these outside inputs could be really good for you right now. So Expand your horizons by exploring them yourself. Hey, this could be a great time for travel. That is one of the things that you can do. But you also need to kind of put yourself out there. In fact, at this time, career advances might actually follow from putting yourself out there in some way. Time to kind of put yourself in the limelight and think out of the box, act out of the box, or for something a little bit new. If you stick too much to your plan without making any adjustments, you will go wrong. So part of it is putting yourself out there, but being smart about what's going on, adjusting to this. If you make clever adjustments to what's happening in the world around you, this is a month for great success. Librans, much less out there. Librans need to be behind the scenes a little bit at this time and operating from a more reserved, private kind of a space. This is not the time to be sharing your intentions and goals. It's time for not only the homework that's done behind the scenes, but things that require a little bit of privacy and circumspection. In fact, if there are delicate matters that need to be undertaken or dealt with, this is the time to do that. You have been challenged lately to be a little bit more tactful in your approach. And Libra, you don't normally have trouble with tact, but there is that little bit of I've had enough that's going on that's making you want to step on the gas a little bit too hard. So be your usual gentle self. Don't go overboard because you don't want to be drawing attention to yourself this month. Behind the scenes means that you can achieve a lot without interference as long as you're willing to do that. This is not a hiding and withdrawal behind the scenes. This is something that if you want things to really gain for you this time, don't share your plans, don't keep your cards on the table. Time to kind of do it yourself and arrive a month later in a very much stronger position. For Capricorns, the same applies to a certain extent, but it's not so much behind the scenes as this is more about introspection and time for yourself and time alone. There still is a lot of frustration because although you are someone who likes time alone or manages with it, you're also someone who's ambitious and needs to be out in the world and likes to be out in the world achieving your thing. Well, this is one of those times where it's not yet ready to happen. In fact, the last couple of months, which you've seen here, have been a little bit frustrating for you. That theme does continue. October has been pretty intense and it carries into the early part of November. Intense challenges and having to face things that are quite difficult and eliminate things which are quite troublesome and difficult in your life. That pattern continues for the early part of November. But then if you stay with the theme of certain amounts of withdrawal and keeping to your own business and behind the scenes kind of thing, you'll be able to deal with this and get a lot of it out the way before you reach the end of this month of Scorpio by the late part of November. So keep to yourself, keep on working on the project of I'm clearing my path because next year is going to be very different for you. Okay, fixed signs, and that includes you, Scorpio. This is your month and your signs. For the fixed signs this month, it's all about interaction. It's happening, you're interacting with others, and if you take charge of the situation, everything else is going to fall into line and everyone else is going to fall into line. So it's the month for taking the initiative, taking charge, sorting it out, sorting them out, confronting the stuff that's in your relationship and really making that clear. If you take the initiative and take out the garbage, this month is going to be a lot more fun for you. Starting with the first of the fixed signs, which is Taurus, especially in your case, you need to focus on what's going on in the relationship at the moment and clarifying things. There's great opportunities to go ahead with goals in your relationship, and one of the good ways to get a relationship to work more smoothly is if you create some shared goals so that things doesn't feel like competition or that you're at odds with each other. It's time in your relationship to take the initiative, identify things, identify any issues you might have, and create paths ahead. You can really make good progress in your personal life at this time. Your partner might be finding you a little bit outspoken, which, since you're someone who's normally a bit more silent, I don't know if we should complain about, but you do need to remember that even though it's good to speak up, it's also good to be tactful. You are a very to the point, sometimes blunt person, and while that is practical and gets good results, in the situation now, you don't want your partner to feel as if you're running the relationship, rather that you're clearing and helping you both move forward. So that's where to be clear, but a little bit tactful in your language at the same time. For Leo's also quite a strong focus in relationships where things are really working smoothly for you. You don't need to be taking too much initiative, but you do need to make sure that there's a balance going on. That right now, the relationship isn't just about you and what you want and about what's happening in your life and all of those kind of things. You just need to make sure that there are shared goals or things are a little bit more equitable. But more important right now is your professional life. And in the subject for the fixed signs of taking the initiative, this is really going to work well for you. If you work in any situation where you're in the public eye or where you deal with the public or anything like that, it's especially advantageous. But even in situations where it's not the public and there's other attention that you need to draw, this is a great time for drawing attention to yourself, making your plans known, or making your publicity or advertising, or whatever is really required to bring attention to whatever it is that you're doing. If you work for yourself, this is the time to be focusing on the creative side of what you do. That's going to bring the best results. You're at the center of it all right now, and that's exactly where Leo needs to be. It's working for you. Scorpios, with your birth month, as I was saying, Scorpios, you are also at the center of your world at the moment, not just because it's your birthday, although this is a great time to be celebrating it, because the fixed signs are having quite a sociable, interactive, people-oriented month. For Scorpios, this is a fantastic time for the most important goals. Those include your professional goals, but also any plans that you have up your sleeve that are going to produce extra in your life, because that's really where the focus seems to be at the moment. You can make extra money at this time. You can get better results than you might have been otherwise expecting at this time, and that's something that's really worthwhile working on. So a little bit of an extra push goes a long way. However, you're not exempt from the frustration that has been bedeviling many of those of us at the moment. And there is a lot of frustration that in your case might just make you do something tactless or reckless or a little bit detrimental to yourself. So because you're in an advantageous situation and you're kind of in the pound seats, why don't you take better advantage of that and make sure that you don't have to over-assert yourself, you don't have to take a hard line, because people are listening to you anyway right now. Aquarians sound a little bit like they are joining the cardinal signs, as in a need to be a little bit behind the scenes in some situations. But for Aquarians, it's not so much behind the scenes as regrouping. So it's time to get back to basics, get back to base camp, if that's what needs to be. If you've spread yourself too thin, have too many things on the go, it's actually time to cut back and reduce and get back to where you need to be, especially since this is a good time for money for you. So if you focus on those things that really are important right now and not the lofty ideas and the maybes and the great plans, you're going to find you can really build your resources. The money needs to be spent at home. This is time to put energy at home. There have been changes happening in your domestic environment. There could have been a clearing happening in your domestic environment, and that now again regrouping, perhaps a little bit of cutting down and cutting back is involved in that as well. For some of you, this is also a time to address family matters, take care of things that come from responsibilities or duties from the past or from the previous generation. So even if there are family duties that seem a little bit excessive, this is the time to get them done. It will work well for you in the months ahead. And that leaves us with the mutable signs. And for the mutable signs, and you are Gemini and Virgo and Sagittarius and Pisces, this is a time to sort out the real from the not so real, or from the illusionary. You might have been pursuing a few pipe dreams, not always a problem, but at this time it might not have gotten you very far. And you might also be dealing with some dwindling resources. So this is a time to sort out what's real from what's not real and focus on what really is going to produce something in your life or what's going to make a difference for you in some way. So that starts especially at you, Gemini, and because it looks like you have been depending on others a little bit too much for a little while. Your own things are getting going and you really need to pick that momentum up and make it work better for you. It's going to take a little while and there's an on-off process for the balance of this year. But there's a warning that you've been a little bit over-dependent and might find yourself trapped or unable to act on your own best interests because there are other people who have some hold over you because of those shared resources. On the whole, though, you will be able to generate your own resources relatively easily this time if you just take some courage and put your own stuff first. That's what it's really all about. There could also be a sign that you're being overshadowed by someone else or by something else and your own talents are not being recognized. So don't be shy. Put them out there. It's time to apply for that job, send that CV, or just stand up for what you love and for what you believe in, because that's really going to work for you. There are other kinds of resources from other people that can be great. So don't be shy when it comes to benefits from sharing and being shared with, but have a strong sense of what are my own goals and what I want to achieve with my own resources. This is the month you'll be able to make progress in that regard. Virgos are in a slightly different situation because your interdependence with others is really working to your advantage at the moment. Remember the admonition to keep aware of the difference between appearance and reality. In some cases, it means the people you thought were your friends are not necessarily your friends. And in some cases, it means you need to be relying on your friends more. There are people offering you help and you're not taking it. So Virgos, you're actually in a strong position to be assessing people around you at the moment. And it's also true that you will be working well in group situations at the moment. In fact, you can gain enormously from the group, whether that's the group of friends or whether that's some kind of professional environment for that in some way. So once you're clear about who really does benefit you and you've made those connections, then working with those people is really going to help you. But it is still important in this process of appearance versus reality to, like your Gemini cousins, to assert your own talents and your own interests and put those forward. Those are really going to help you at the moment. And again, like the Geminis, progress happens. When it comes to Sagittarius, well, you might have heard me talk about tactlessness to a few of the other signs. Tactlessness famously belongs to you. And if that's been your mode in the last little while, it's probably gotten you into trouble. But not by tactlessness, by making promises that you can't necessarily keep or getting yourself involved in things that later on you can't live up to. So this is the time to take a bit of a harder line, to deal with the complications you've gotten yourself into in the last month. That probably means you've gotten yourself into some extra debt or some obligation or duties of some kind. You do need to resolve those as much as possible, but you also need to get those off your plate. Your chart warns that you've probably weighed yourself down with something that is too much to carry, or you might have trapped or blocked yourself because of an obligation that you've undertaken. Sometimes the Sagittarian response to that is just to throw it all in the air and march off. That's not going to be easy to do at this time, so deal with it a little bit at the time. Actually, in the long run, this is going to be a good time for money for you if you stop getting yourself involved in debt or spending the money before you actually have it. So keep control of your resources, and this ends up being a time when you can actually build them and end November in a bit of a more solid position if you've dealt with them that way. And finally, Pisces, the last of the mutable signs, sometimes said to be the most creative of the signs, and that's your refuge this month. This is a month when you're going to be able to actually focus a little bit on the non-reality. All the other mutable signs worrying too much about reality. You, because you're focusing on your creative side, can look at your ideals and your ideas and put them into action as much as possible. Creativity doesn't only mean the arts. Plenty of you Pisceans are working in all sorts of fields, but creativity means On the one hand, taking the initiative, but using your own resources, your own ideas, putting your own stamp onto something, putting your own energy into something. It's something that stems from you. Also in astrology, we define creativity as the things that you are born able to do or naturally able to do. So they include natural talents and abilities, which we often don't recognize, whether that's managing people or particular skills or talents that have business potential. Those are all considered the meaning of creativity in astrology. So use your own gifts and resources, especially in the creative field, but also in any other field, and that's what's going to lead to great success this month. Be sure to join me for a fun and interesting show next week when I look at the issue of luck and tell you how to create your own luck. Would you believe it? And of course, as usual, your questions answered. So contact me on any of those addresses. Be sure to be here Friday at noon on YouTube or 7:30 p.m. on Cape Town TV, repeating Sunday 1:30 p.m.